technical session on India in the multipolar world order. In chair, we have Dr. Archana Negi. Ma'am, the floor is all yours. Mr. Prakash Singh, are you here? You can please come in front. Come there.
So, a very good morning to everyone in the room. And before I start, thank you, Dr. Stuti Banerjee, for reaching out to me. And thank you, Ambassador Singh, for having me here. I was just saying that after a very, very, very long time, I'm actually coming physically to ICWA. Although there were several sessions that happened during the pandemic, so those were all online. And that was a different world. That was a time when we used to wait for a return to this kind of a setting. So I'm really happy to be here, also to see very many familiar faces that we've probably met in so many different settings. So let me welcome you to this first session. This is titled India and the Reformed Multipolar World Order. And I have 5 minutes to begin with, in which I have about 4 points to make before I hand over to the speakers who are the real stars of today. My first point, and because this is a young scholars conference and because as academics, this is also about developing critical thinking, therefore my first point is a question. That is the current world order best characterized as a multipolar one? Maybe we can actually sit back and also give some thought to this idea of multipolarity. And Ambassador Singh and Dr. Raja Mohan have actually made the task easier because there's such a large overlap in some of the points that I wanted to make as well. So the idea of multipolarity is very much, in vogue now. Which is essentially about a global order where a number of powers that are somewhat equally matched in capacity and in influence. The idea of multipolarity, however, is not uncontested. So in a recent writing earlier this year, you had Stephen Brooks and William Wohlforth in Foreign Affairs argue that multipolarity is in fact a myth. Why do they say that? There are several arguments that they make to support what they're saying, and they say that any country that can plausibly be ranked third, and in the list of countries there, India is included, is not close enough to the United States or China. And in terms of population, of course, apart from India, nobody else makes the cut. India does not make the cut in the context of the economic power that we are talking about when we speak of bipolarity. My own colleague at JNU, Professor Rajesh Rajagopalan, has argued in his writings that not only are we in a bipolar age, but also that it is dangerous to think otherwise. And partly because of what Dr. Mohan just said, that assessing correctly your location is very important in terms of the choices that you make, right? So those mistakes could be costly. Another characteristic of bipolarity is the distance, that there has to be a sufficient distance between the polar powers and any of the other great powers. This is also met if you look at the argument of bipolarity. So once again, at the cost of repetition, the importance of understanding bipolarity is that in a bipolar system, states will behave differently than they would in a unipolar or a multipolar system, and therefore there are consequences in terms of state behavior and outcomes. Therefore, these consequences make it very important to figure out which system you are in. So the assumption embedded in the multipolar rhetoric, especially the assumption that India is one of the poles, again, should be cautiously treated. Like was said, one of the challenges which Dr. Mohan just talked about is this whole notion of triumphalism, and this is something perhaps we can discuss. Second point is about India making a place for itself in the global order. This has certainly been the case. And post the global financial crisis, 2007-2009, there's been this turning point where globally there has been a sense that the emerging economies need to be included in decision making. And in this new world order, India has certainly marked a place for itself. Normally variously referred to with the following terms. You'll find these familiar. It's called an engine of growth, economic powerhouse, the largest democracy, pluralist society, civilizational state, etc. So in global fora, India is acquiring an increasingly prominent voice. It plays a central role in fostering South-South cooperation. It's an influential member of the BRICS and also a founding member of the New Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. Currently, it holds the presidency of the G20. Of course, I don't need to say that in this room. We've just seen everything that happened under the summit. And importantly, under its presidency, also African Union became a permanent member of the G20 with the same status as the European Union. Traditionally, it's been a leader of the non-aligned movement, founding member of the SAARC, the BIMSTEC, the IORA, etc., and several initiatives. Interestingly, it has also in the recent years extended to other regional associations. So just to give you two examples, the observer status that it has in the Arctic Council in 2013 and the full membership that it now has in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in 2017. And the multiple, you mentioned them as concentric circles, but the multiple alliances that it has in the context of Quad, the Quad Security Dialogue, BRICS, of course, I mentioned, I2U2, etc. So the Venn diagram of its international institutionalism is quite complicated. It's a spaghetti bowl in a sense of affiliations and memberships. Third point is that, however, there are certain obstacles. There are some areas where you fall short. And the most obvious one there is the bid that it has, in terms of unfulfilled aspirations, is the bid that it has for permanent membership in the UN Security Council. And of course, this is a very well-known story, the bid that it has collectively made as part of the G4, and all of its memberships within the UN negotiating blocs like the L69 or Friends of the UNSC Reform Group. We do know that India has been part of the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that it needs to be. Even the UN Secretary General, I think last week, said that he understands, whatever that may mean. He said, I understand the aspirations that India has in the context of permanent memberships. But this has not happened as yet. In the Bretton Woods institutions as well, the call for reform, which is also part of the G20 declaration, we haven't really been able to get a sort of increase in voice to the extent that India has had. So one point of view has been, therefore, that instead of investing in a lot of diplomatic, over-investing in diplomatic capital and campaigns, India must basically raise its military, economic, and geopolitical stature to become important enough to be offered that permanent seat. And that brings me to the last point, which is the point of the other India. Again, a point that was raised in the first session as well, that while India is doing well in aggregates, the human development statistics are not as aspiring. So whether we talk about education, health, nutrition goals, etc., although there has been drop in poverty, we've seen the UN, a recent pat on the back about poverty, etc., but the Human Development Index rankings continue to be poor, even in relation to the other South Asian members, etc. So closing the gap between the two Indias that we clearly have is a challenge that we will need to address before creating a space, any kind of space in the multipolar order. So these are some of the sort of thoughts that I wanted to put on the table, also because I saw many of them reflected in the papers today. This is the real important part. So this was throat clearing, as I would call it. With this, I would like to now hand over the floor completely to the young scholars. Perhaps you could weave in some of the issues that have been discussed also in the inaugural session when you're presenting your papers. I'm not sure if the sequence remains as it was in the draft program. Okay, great. So we start first with one of the most important discussions, which is that of India's perspective on the UN Security Council reforms. Let me welcome Chongpai or Chongpi? How do you correctly? Chongpi. So Chongpi, welcome. Chongpi is a PhD researcher at the Department of Political Science in NEHU. We are very, very pleased to have you here, and you have 12 minutes, and I will try to be strict with time, so over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So I will directly get in. Okay. Established in 1945, the United Nations Security Council is one of the 5 principal organs of the United Nations charged with maintaining international peace and security. In today's world, there has been a deepening and broadening of tasks of the Security Council as it deals not only with the interstate but also intrastate conflicts. However, the structure and composition of UN's premier organ, the Security Council, reflects the historical agreements reached 78 years ago by the victors of World War II. The UN body, charged with the primary responsibility for maintaining peace and security, and whose decisions are supposed to be binding, remains anchored in the past. More specifically, the Council's present composition no longer represents a world that has seen 142 new countries since 1945. Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean do not have permanent representation on the Council and are therefore calling for the Council's composition to be adapted to new realities. It is a matter of concern that globally important countries like India, Japan, Germany, and South Africa still need to be permanent members. The United Nations Security Council should reflect the diversity of our world and provide equal opportunities to all regions to participate in shaping global peace and security. Now, the demand for reforms at United Nations Security Council encompass 5 main issues. The first one is the category of membership. As we all know, the United Nations Security Council has 15 members, 10 non-permanent, who are elected for a 2-year term by the United Nations General Assembly, and 5 permanent members, who are also known as the Big P5. They are China, United Kingdom, US, France, and Russia. So the debate here is, do we really need to still distinguish between the members, because such differences in categorizations may not be relevant in today's time, as the world order has changed drastically and many new nations are playing important roles in the maintenance of international peace and security. The second one would be the lack of adequate representation. It is felt by a lot of people that there is a huge European bias in the P5 due to the presence of UK and France, including Russia, while regions like Latin America, the Caribbean groups, and Africa do not have a single membership. Even in the case of Asia, although it is the biggest and the most populous continent, it is represented only by China. The lack of representation of geopolitical and geoeconomically important countries is leaving out a large segment of global opinion to have a voice in the highest security summit. The third issue would be the misuse of veto power. Now, as we all know, the veto power is a special power which is given to the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. It gives the permanent members the ability to reject or veto any action by the UNSC that does not align with their national interests. The veto is often called a self-chosen club of the privileged and non-democratic. Recently, Russia vetoed resolutions that would have put sanctions on it for violating Ukraine's sovereignty, interdependence, unity, and territorial integrity. The fourth would be the expansion of membership. The changing needs of global governance for peace and security require significant reforms in the UNSC, including expanding its permanent and non-permanent seats to make it more representative of the world's regions. UNSC, being made in the post-war era, is considered not relevant. in its composition for changing times, such as changing balance of power with the relative shift in power among countries. It has only been once that the non-permanent members have increased from 6 to 10 in 1963 on the demand of the developing countries. In order to adequately handle the intricate and dynamic threats to international peace and security, the UNSC has to undergo considerable reforms, including extending its permanent and non-permanent seats. Many are of the opinion that changed power structure should be reflected in the composition of the most important organ of the United Nations. Now, why do we need these reforms? The first, as already mentioned, is because of the changing geopolitical situations. Though geopolitics has changed drastically, the UNSC has changed relatively little, except for adding 4 non-permanent members to the Council in 1963. Although the overall membership for the UN has increased from 113 to 193 countries, the composition of the UNSC remains the same. UNSC reflects the geopolitical realities of post-Second World War period. Countries that were earlier considered powerful are slowly on the decline, whereas new countries who were not represented earlier are gaining prominence. Therefore, this geopolitical situation that has changed has to be taken into account. The second would be inequitable economic and geographical representation. While Europe as a continent is overrepresented, Asia is underrepresented, Africa and South America have no representation at all. The demand for increased representation became more vocal when countries, especially the developing countries, felt the need to have better reflections of their priorities in the Security Council. Africa is home to more than 1.4 billion people, Latin America more than 600 billion people, yet they have no voice in the United Nations Security Council. The next would be the North-South divide. The permanent UNSC membership portrays the big North and South divide in the decision-making of the security measures. For instance, there is no permanent member from Africa, even though 75% of its work is focused on that continent. The other issue is the emerging issues: deepening economic interdependence, worsening environmental degradation, and transnational threats also call for effective multilateral negotiations among the countries based on consensus. Because of all these new complex issues, it is important for the United Nations Security Council to be more representative than ever. Yet, members who take all the critical decisions of the UNSC are still being taken by the Security Council's permanent members. Next, we move on to India's perspectives. With regards to regional representation, India has argued for an equitable geographical representation and urgent need for mitigating the non-representation and underrepresentation of some regions in permanent and non-permanent categories. The demand for regional representation has been made on multiple grounds, including historical injustice, entire regions not equitably represented, or even underrepresented in a critical category. India also calls for an enlarged council and working of the methods of the council. India, along with other G4 countries, for example, Brazil, Germany, and Japan, proposed adding 6 new permanent members to the Security Council, along with other. India, along with other G4, proposed adding 6 new permanent members to the Security Council, 2 seats each for Asia and Africa, and 1 seat for the Western European and others group, and the Latin American and the Caribbean group, respectively, and 4 non-permanent members to the Security Council, 1 each for Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. Review of the reform 15 years after the amendment to the Charter has entered into force. G4 also suggests that the non-permanent members hold the presidency of the Council at least once in their tenure. The Security Council and the General Assembly. India opines that the relationship between the Security Council and the General Assembly should not be competitive or adversarial, but one of synergy and complementarity. The relationship must be based on transparency, mutual trust, increased dialogue, and frequent interaction with all members. India thus has called for a greater transparency and consistency to improve the relationship between the 2 important organs of the UN. In conclusion, India was among the 51 original members of the UN in 1945. India views the United Nations as a forum to guarantee and maintain international peace and security, and has worked with other members to strengthen the United Nations system to combat new global challenges such as terrorism, piracy, disarmament, human rights, peace building, and peacekeeping. Therefore, India's claim for permanent membership is a genuine demand in the changed geopolitics of the 21st century. India is the most prominent and least controversial option to add as a permanent member and is long overdue for a seat. India's demand is not illegitimate, as India wields a certain influence in world affairs today due to its impressive economic growth and solid military base. South Asia, being a victim of various repercussions of war, terrorism and extremism, India gains more say on its neighbors' problems. As a permanent member, India will have the power to challenge the ethos and working style of the permanent members of the UNSC. In the contemporary period, if India has to make a solid claim for permanent membership, it has to focus on economic growth with accompanying military might single-handedly. By any objective criteria such as population size of the country, civilization, legacy, and contributions to UN activities, India is eminently qualified for permanent membership. There is no excuse to keep India out anymore. A country with a population of 1.4 billion, a major military power, including, some say that including India in the membership, in the UNSC permanent membership will be a privilege for India, whereas it is the other way around. Including India in the UNSC membership will enrich the Council, make it more representative and powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Chongpi, you have actually got 2 more minutes. So anything urgent that you want to add? No. Okay, so thank you for making that case for India. I think you've been a very effective lawyer on behalf of the case for India's membership. There are, of course, many other questions that arise from this claim, which is that we need to remember that in the structures of the United Nations, there are principles embedded. And the principles of representativeness, which you invoked very often, is sadly opposed to the principle of efficiency. And therefore, the UN is structured in a particular way where representativeness happens in the General Assembly and efficiency is in a limited membership. So who sits on the high table and how these principles will be impacted by these entries is something I think we need to also. But I guess we will open up for a Q&A session. We will have time for this, so we can come back to the discussion. Let me go to the next presentation first. We can perhaps have all the presentations and then a conversation. Shubham is here. Yes, so Mr. Shubham Singh Charak, let me welcome you. I hope you are next.
Mr. Shivam Kumar Pandey is the speaker.
Shivam is next. Yeah. Okay, my apologies. So Shubham, you can wait. Shivam is not in the... Yes. He's right here. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So welcome, Shivam. Shivam is from the Rashtriya Raksha University, Gandhinagar.
Yes.
And you've come all the way, so thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And you are going to be speaking on India's strategic adaptation in the evolving multipolar world, navigating the reformed global order.
Yes, ma'am.
So over to you, and 12 minutes to you as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, hello. Good morning to one and all present here. Yeah. Please change the slide. Which direction? Point kind of. Okay. Thank you. The outline of the presentation is introduction, research methodology, objectives, India championing the cause of Global South, 5 pillars of India's foreign policy, navigating the global crisis, pandemics, conflicts, India's role, vision for shaping the future, and conclusions. As for the introduction, we can see that the world is currently witnessing the emergence of a new multilateral world order, evidencing the dramatic change in the world political thoughts and balance of power in international relations. India, standing among the top 5 economies globally and representing the world's largest democracy, is pivotal in reshaping a reformed multipolar world order. This reforming global order is witnessing global issues where India's role in addressing these challenges, particularly from the perspective of the Global South, is very significant. It aims to promote and reintegrate itself with the global economy, improved cooperation with the South Asian neighbors, renewed strategic connections in the Indian Ocean, Middle East, Central Asia, and Africa. As a result, it can be classified as a rising power moving up in the global power hierarchy. The second section, the research methodology is mainly the doctrinal, and it explores the strategic adaptations, engagement with the Global South, and its vision in navigating, shaping the emerging world order. The second section discusses on championing the cause for the Global South, where I will be discussing on the issue of unified vision or perspective. Preserving the strategic autonomy is a crucial objective for India. This autonomy is understood as Atmanirbhar, self-reliant thinking grounded in Indian philosophical practices. This Indian nature of strategic thinking is the first pillar of Indian diplomacy, and it emphasizes the necessity of being self-reliant and independent in strategic decision-making. India has consistently emphasized its policy of non-alignment and strategic autonomy. This policy, the regional cooperation which India has emphasized and its participations are essential to these regional dynamics can be seen in the Indian initiatives like the strategic landscape in Indo-Pacific regions, where the change will be driven by the shifting powers dynamic of US, United States, China's increasing power, and engagement with Japan, India, Australia, and European Union, as well as changing policy orientations of South Korea and the central role played by the ASEAN. India has strongly advocated for multilateralism, emphasizing the importance of international law and institutions. The next discussion is on addressing the challenge for the current international system. Global South, which has suffered the most of the bipolar global political order after the Second World War, there is highly likely chance that the world is again moving towards bipolarity, one led by the US and the other by Russia and China, who has a global strike capability as well extra-regional sever power capabilities. The present international order has been strained by geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainties, health crises affecting the Global South significantly. India is committed to addressing these issues through domestic reforms and international cooperations. India has emphasized the urgent need for reforms in global institutions like the WB, IMF, WTO, UNSC, to better address these challenges, ensure a more equitable global system, and ensure that they reflect the realities of 21st century and adequately represent the Global South. It has emphasized the importance of rule-based order and respect for the UN Charter, calling for the fairness and equity in global rules and norms. In the next section, I will be discussing the 5 pillars of India's foreign policy. India joined the non-aligned movement to create an independent path in the world politics. India's approach with the NAM has facilitated in significantly restructuring the international economic order. The similar and altogether redefined policies underlying the NAM can be seen embodied in the present India's foreign policy, grounded in the 5 pillars of Samman, Samvad, Samriddhi, Suraksha, and Sanskriti, which serves as the frameworks for its global engagement. These principles guide India's effort in fostering dignity, dialogue, prosperity, security, cultural linkages, and commitment to solidarity with other post-colonial states, laying the foundation for its relations with the Global South and shaping the reform world order. India's diplomatic initiatives of Act East policy and Neighborhood First policy highlighted its focus on strengthening ties with the East Asian countries and immediate neighbors, respectively. India supports a rule-based international order that respects all nations' sovereignties and territorial integrity. The next section I will be discussing on navigating the global crisis, pandemics and conflicts, equitable access and supply chain. The pandemic and the ongoing conflicts, notably the Ukraine conflicts, have accentuated the disruptions in global supply chain, impacting essential medicines, foods, fertilizers, energy availability. India has understood the need for equitable access to these essential resources and highlighted the concerns of the Global South. India, who has emerged as a stable supply chain for the world, has taken several steps to, like investing in technology, digitization to enhance visibility, agility, and collaborations across the supply chain to reimagine its and to overcome the challenges, including diversifying its trading partners, sources of supply, to reduce dependence on a few countries or regions, therefore developing domestic capabilities and capacities to meet the local demands and reduce imports, enhancing skill developments, training supply chain professionals to cope with the changing requirements and expectations. And also, altogether, to achieve and to become a 5 trillion economy. The fifth section I will be discussing on shaping the future, India's role and vision, where I will be discussing on building economic inclusive order, building an inclusive global order. India's initiatives aim to build an inclusive political and financial global order that addresses many of the issues which I have discussed in the past. It also has a foreign policy that has evolved from the non-alignment to multi-alignment, balancing its relations with major powers like Russia and the US. India seeks to preserve its strategic autonomy, emphasizing self-reliance, flexibility in diplomatic endeavors. India envisions itself as a central pole in global politics, following the US, Russia, and China. It aims to bridge the gap between being a middle power and a significant power. India emphasizes the unity of Asian nations and aspires to become a multipolar, to make a multipolar world centered around multipolar Asia. The next discussion is influencing geopolitical outcomes. India's strategic geopositioning as a central position in Asia, acting as a proposed north-south transport corridor for its peninsula, because of its peninsular shape that gives a vast coastline, providing access to Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, dominance in the Indian Ocean. Its neighboring China, which is now a global power, and its position is crucial concerning the ancient Silk Road and the modern Belt and Road Initiative, which is spearheaded by China. India is a global power in South, and its diplomatic effort, which is aimed to influence the geopolitical outcomes in the emerging multipolar world order. For the conclusion, I can only say that we have seen that the past decades has seen significant shift in the global political landscape, which is primarily due to the rise of the Indo-Pacific region. India's strategic adaptations in the evolving multipolar world is marked by its leadership in championing the interest of the evolving multipolar world order, which is marked by its leadership in championing the interest of the Global South, addressing the global challenges, laying the groundwork for a reformed inclusive world order. India also significantly impacts the international order reshapes the future geopolitical landscape through its diplomatic strategies, policies, frameworks, international collaborations. Understanding India's role, vision, and its efforts is very crucial to understanding and comprehending the complexities and potential developments in international relations of the 21st century. The country's policy is to be a Vishwamitra, a friend of the world. We are befriending the world, and the world is seeking our friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivam, and that's perfect timing.
Thank you.
With the principles like inclusion, at least two problems are that at both levels, inclusion is to be implemented. And the problem really emerges when you say include who, right? How do you work on who to include and who to exclude? Maybe we can speak a little bit more about that during the conversation, but thank you for sticking to time. I think a lot of what you said actually strengthens her case, because she's claiming that we need to be sitting at the table, and you've just made a very, very nice CV for the country. So let's move on from here, and now finally to Shubham as well. So Shubham, you have come from Jammu University? Central University of Jammu. So welcome, and have you traveled only for this conference? Okay, great. Wonderful. And you're speaking about a very new sort of engagement, so new that it almost sounds like a rock band. You know, there used to be a band called U2 when we were small. I don't know if it still exists. So I2U2. Interesting to know, because it's a new, very, very new initiative, and how does this fit in with the existing alliances, etc., is perhaps something you'll throw light on. So over to you, and 12 minutes in hand.
Can I have the PPT, please? Good morning, everyone who present here. So today I am going to speak on India's engagement in I2U2, unveiling opportunities and confronting challenges. So first question is, what is I2U2? So I2U2 is a group of 4 countries which comprises of India, Israel, UAE, and US. This group was conceptualized during the foreign minister meetings of these 4 countries, which happened in October 2021. This is a minilateral forum, which is for international forum for economic cooperation. So in this forum, these 4 countries are jointly investing in 6 mutually identified areas, which are water, energy, transportation, space, health, and food security. So the first meeting of this group was held virtually in July 2022. So the next question which arises is that, are there any strategic interests of the group that we are going to see in the upcoming slides? So the thing is, why it is significant for India. So the I2U2 grouping is particularly important for India because it gives New Delhi the opportunity to use its strategic ties with Israel, UAE, and US to forge profitable economic alliance. By the way, India is already, all these 3 countries are already strategic partners of India. India can leverage investment, innovation, and technology from I2U2 to accelerate its own journey toward becoming the world's 3rd largest economy in the coming decades. This I2U2 can also act as a force multiplier for Make in India initiative by pushing for manufacturing facilities to be set up in the country, particularly in the field of artificial intelligence, fintech, transportation, and space. Opportunities for India. So first opportunity is trade and investment. So with Israel, India is already having trade relations, but with the help of I2U2, we can enhance this relation, especially in the defense sector, agriculture, modern technologies like robotics and AI. With US, India can enhance its relations, especially in the trade and investment of pharmaceuticals, raw materials for various things, oil, defense transfer of technology, which India till date is not having with US, and automotive and manufacturing sector. With UAE, apart from the petroleum products, India has signed comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which can boost the MSME in India with investment in gold, jewelry, precious stones, cotton, and textile. Exchange of technologies. India, with the help of I2U2, can exchange technology and expertise to modern its infrastructure, create low carbon development pathways for industry, and improve public health. By the way, this can also help India in building its smart city projects. It can also help India in promoting the development of critical, emerging, and green technologies. Cybersecurity. Right now, we are living in a cyber age. So, where from our phone to our house, everything is going to be online. We can do anything online. So, the cybersecurity is one of the most important aspect in the present day life. So, India can collaborate with these countries for digital security, threat assessment, and threat intelligence. India, with the help of I2U2, can conduct joint cyber security exercises and developing the cutting edge cyber capacities. Right now, most of the our critical infrastructure are going through the this cyber age, whether it's our nuclear power plants or our airports. Everything requires a cyber security. So these critical infrastructure can also be protected with the help of these I2U2 countries through this cyber security initiatives. Every country in this group is not same. US is already developed, where India is in a developing stage, where India can pool the resources for this cyber security research and development with the countries which are already enhanced in this area. Apart from this, India can go for the global security advocacy with the help of I2U2. Maritime security. We are living in a area in a time where maritime security is one of the most important aspect in the present day life. But mostly we neglect this region. Most of our trade happens through the ocean. So this, with the help of I2U2, we can secure our maritime sea lines of communications, like the Quad, which is already there with India, India, US, Australia, and Japan. We can initiate maritime exercises where we can also share the technology for this maritime domain. We can initiate counter piracy operations within the Indian Ocean region as well as beyond the Indian Ocean with the help of I2U2. With the help of these countries, India can go for the maritime domain awareness, which is highly required in the present day contemporary world. So we can also counter the maritime terrorism, which is one of the biggest threat, non-traditional security threat in the present day. And its biggest example is the 26/11 attack on Mumbai. We can also take help and give our humanitarian assistance and disaster relief for whatever happening within the Indian Ocean and beyond. We can also advocate for rule-based maritime order as initiated by the United Nations Convention on Laws on Seas. For counter-terrorism, India can go for intelligence sharing and also for countering the radicalization by initiating these counter-radicalization programs. We can also use, as previously mentioned in the cyber security, we can also use cyber security for the counter-terrorism. Right now, there is no legal definition of the terrorism. With the help of I2U2, we can go for a legal framework in which we can define the definition of terrorism first. We can also take expertise from other countries like Israel, which is having a upper hand in border security management. So we can use those expertise for our own border security and counterterrorism. We can also use the expertise of other countries for countering terrorism in the conflict zone. Strategic balance. India is having a strategic autonomy. So India can use this group for as a counterweight to China. We can also counter the Turkey's assertiveness in the Arab world. We can enhance our regional influence. We can also balance the geostrategic interests in the Indian Ocean and Asia. This group can also help India in securing its energy security. Soft power diplomacy. This is one of the highlights of the India, because India is a pioneer in soft power diplomacy. We can have cultural exchange. We already have cultural exchange with Indo-Israel Cultural Festival. Indian cuisines are already famous in Israel, UAE, and US. We can also go for, there are already education collaboration, but we can enhance this education collaboration for our own benefit. Yoga and wellness is already there. Ayurveda and traditional medicine can also help India in achieving the soft power diplomacy by becoming a destination for this Ayurveda and traditional medicine. Indian diaspora and promotion of Indian art and culture can also help in increasing the soft power diplomacy of India. Now the challenges. The first challenge is the geographical expectation of the partnership. This partnership is having a vast geographical separation. India lies in South Asia, whereas the two countries, Israel and UAE, are in the Middle East, and US is in the North Africa. So there is a vast geographical separation. So due to which there requires a coordinating efforts in the different time zones. But due to this, there is a challenge for real-time decision making. There can be delay in the response time, and moreover, the logistic is also cannot be very viable because there is a huge distance between these countries. Economic and technological disparities. All these countries are not financially equal. Some countries are very high as the per capita GDP, whereas country like India is having a very low per capita GDP. So there is a challenge in the resource allocation with the partnership due to the financial disparity. The technology gap between USA and Israel on one side and India and UAE on the other side is very big. For this, there is a requirement for adaptation to varying level of advanced technologies. Individual differences. Within these countries, within this group, there is individual differences. Like Iran is having its rivalry with US and Israel, where India and UAE is not having the same. US and India are wary of the China's footprint all over the globe, whereas the Israel and UAE, for their part, have more positive view of China. Cultural and ethnic suspectivity. So there is a history of cultural and ethnic sensitivity in this region, especially in the Middle East. Interreligious conflicts such as Israel and Palestine is already there, and these have a cultural and religious dimension that can affect the partnership building efforts. There is also an issue of handling of cultural and ethnic issues. So we have to do this in very systematic way, otherwise this can backfire to India. Regulating, managing external influence. Within this group, as we have seen the individual differences, there is a need for regulating and managing the external influence, like the Russian influence. India is having a very good relation with Russia as well as with USA. So there is a Russian influence to counter US influence on India. The role of China, this is also there, which the group has to be taken care of. The regional dynamics such as rivalry involving Iran, Saudi and Israel. So this is also which is needed to be taken care. So I can conclude here that I2U2 is a multilateral partnership with the hopeful future. Despite the challenges, there are more opportunities for India being an active member of this partnership. However, this partnership is already working on water, energy, transportation, space, health and food security. There are other fields where India can explore and take this partnership to collective strategic partnership for the regional growth, development, peace and stability. These are some of the references, and thank you. This is from my side.
Thank you, Shubham, also for sticking to time. Very interesting to know about the new alliance. Just a small word of caution is about, engaging in futuristic prognosis, as it were. This can sometimes be difficult. So in the first part of your presentation, you had a lot of what can happen, but that can happen and may not happen either. So that is a cautious territory to tread. Perhaps a little more about the value added of this grouping. Like you mentioned, there are already strategic alliances individually, Yes. So what, especially Israel? Because with the others, India is already in various others. There's the Quad with the US, yes. UAE will now be part of the BRICS, etc. So maybe you could think of these things and come back during the discussion. Our last presentation now, Saurav. So welcome, Saurav, from Punjab University, Chandigarh. And you are speaking today on a cross-cutting sort of a concern, which is multipolarity through soft power. Some references have already emerged in the previous presentations, so over to you. And you also have a very nice assertion right in your title, 21st century belongs to India. That's part of the title of your paper. So please go ahead and tell us how.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Distinguished guests and my fellow citizens, I'll be speaking on this topic, And to begin with, just defining a few terms here, what polarity means for us, and how we are talking about the multipolar order. Polarity in the realm of international relations encompasses the various ways in which power is distributed across the global landscape. Historically, realist perspectives have prevailed in defining power as tangible through military and economic might. Consequently, the international order was labeled bipolar during the Cold War era and unipolar after the collapse of the USSR. We are currently transitioning into a possible multipolar configuration, referring to a distribution of power in the international system where multiple countries or regions have significant influence and capabilities. However, the sources of power remain dynamic, evolving with the times. Notably, historical shifts will illustrate this evolution. Spain's dominance in the 16th century hinged on gold reserves, colonial trade, mercenary forces, and dynastic connections, followed by the Netherlands' ascendancy in the 17th century due to trade, capital markets, and a formidable navy. The 18th century saw France rise through population, rural industry, administration, military prowess, while Britain's 19th century influence was built on industry, political unity, finance, naval strength, liberal values, and its insular position. The 20th century then witnessed the United States' supremacy due to its economic scale, technological leadership, military might, alliances, and liberal internationalism. In the 21st century, as the cost of applying military and hard power escalates, soft power, conceptualized by Joseph Nye, takes a center stage. It operates through appeal and attraction, involving the ability to sway others without coercion. The 21st century is very well poised to become a century of multipolarity through soft power, implying that multiple countries or regions will exert influence and shape global affairs, not through military force or coercion, but primarily through soft power assets and strategies. Scholars like Amitav Acharya have contended that an idea shift holds greater sway than ongoing power shifts. The rise of India as a soft power will be instrumental in effecting such an idea shift in the favor of India. The purpose of this presentation is to argue that the 21st century is set to become India's era, with the nation spearheading the development of a reformed multipolar global order through its potent soft power. India's rich cultural heritage, diverse traditions, and expansive global outreach combine to form a distinct brand of soft power, positioning it as a consequential player in the emerging global paradigm. Ladies and gentlemen, the soft power of India is not just a tool of diplomacy. It is an embodiment of its identity and its values. It is a reminder that the strength of a nation isn't solely measured by its military or economic might, but also by the goodwill it generates and the positive change it inspires. Let us take a look at the 5 leading resources or instruments that assist India's role in multipolarity through soft power. First, the people or the population of India. India's journey towards global leadership begins with its people. It is home to over 1 billion souls, each with their unique talents, dreams, and aspirations. It is this human resource that forms the bedrock of its strength. In a world where knowledge and innovation are the driving forces, India's young, dynamic, and increasingly educated population is its most significant asset. Added to it is the fact that the people of Indian origin, its diaspora, numbering over 32 million, can be found in every nook and corner of the world at leading economic and political positions. In the tapestry of human history, India's story is one that embodies resilience, innovation, and the unstoppable spirit of a nation. From the pages of an ancient civilization to the bustling metropolises of today, India has charted a course of remarkable transformation and progress. As we look ahead, the rise of India is not just a matter of national pride. It's a source of inspiration for the entire world. It's a reminder that no obstacle is too great, no dream too audacious when fueled by determination and unity. The second point here is foreign policy. India's foreign policy, characterized by the 5 pillars, as my fellow speaker also pointed out, Samman, Samvad, Samriddhi, Suraksha, and Sanskriti, form a solid foundation for its enhanced role. Some factors will support this argument. First, India has adeptly utilized soft power diplomacy in its advocacy for global agendas such as sustainable development and climate action, trade mechanisms, etc., bolstering its geopolitical influence more so among the nations of the global south, which view India as a champion of their rights, thus inspiring them to follow their suit. Secondly, India has demonstrated its capabilities as a friend in need by extending a helping hand through its humanitarian efforts, whether in responding to natural disasters or providing essential vaccines. This has won India the gratitude and admirations of nations near and far, thereby aiding India's rise as a soft power. Thirdly, by actively participating in and supporting international organizations like the United Nations, along with promoting reforms, India is leading the way in underscoring a commitment to shaping a more just and inclusive world order, which was also evident during India's presidency of the G20. Fourthly, leadership is not just economic or military, it's also about moral leadership. India, with its philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and the principles of non-violence, has a history of championing peace and unity. In a world that is oftentimes divided, India can offer the example of harmony among its diverse religious and ethnic communities. And lastly, the respect and trust earned by India in South Asia and beyond by its commitment to peace and stability in the region. India's regional leadership exemplifies the positive influence we can exert when we prioritize cooperation over confrontation. The third element that I now come to is culture, which is one of the most important aspects of India's soft power. While the concept of soft power originated in the West, India's rich civilizational history and cultural diversity make it a natural participant in this realm. From the timeless melodies of classical music to the vibrant colors of its festivals, from the flavors of its cuisine to the intricate design of its textiles, from the ancient wisdom of yoga and meditation to the vibrancy of Bollywood, India's cultural heritage is a source of inspiration and fascination for people across the globe. Its culture has the power to bridge gaps and create connections where language and politics often fail. The fourth aspect of soft power of India is the promotion of universal values. By consistently adhering, actively promoting and upholding universal values such as democracy, human rights, environmental sustainability, and social justice, and championing them on the global stage, India inspires others to follow suit, which is one way to use soft power to shape a new world order. In a world that oftentimes seems divided by walls and barriers, India stands as a beacon of diversity, tolerance, and inclusivity. India has a history of coexistence among a multitude of religions, languages, and traditions. It's a model for the world that shows that harmony can prevail amidst differences. India's rise as a major power has also been marked by its unwavering commitment to democracy and pluralism. India has shown that 1 billion people can make their voices heard, elect leaders, and effect change through peaceful and democratic means. This sends a message to the world that democracy is not just a Western concept, but a universal aspiration. The last element that I need to discuss here about India's soft power is science and technology. In the field of education, science and technology, India's soft power shines brightly. Indian scholars and scientists are making groundbreaking discoveries and advancements that benefit not only India, but humanity as a whole. From India's space odyssey in the form of Mars Orbiter mission and the Chandrayaan trio to the development of life-saving vaccines, its scientific prowess has demonstrated its commitment to addressing global challenges. By sharing its knowledge and technology with the world, India contributes to the betterment of humanity and strengthens its position as a global leader. To conclude, India's ascent as a major soft power on the global stage is undeniably impressive, but it is not without weaknesses. One notable weakness is the lack of a coherent and well-funded cultural diplomacy strategy to leverage its soft power assets effectively. Additionally, social issues like poverty, gender inequality, and religious tensions can sometimes overshadow its soft power, which also reflects in India's precarious missing from the Soft Power 30 Index by Portland Communications or the Global Soft Power Index by Brand Finance. Coupled with it, another weakness which Dr. C. Rajamohan also pointed out, the idea of triumphalism. That is, are we already there in terms of soft power? Have we already started seeing ourselves as world leaders, that we are a pole already? Now, bringing about a new world order through the use of soft power is therefore a complex and ambitious endeavor, and soft power is just one element of it. Other factors, including hard power, geopolitical realities, and the actions of other nations, also play crucial roles in determining the course of international relations and the emergence of a new world order. Additionally, the success of any effort to reshape the world order through soft power depends on the willingness of other nations to cooperate and align their interests and values with the vision being promoted. India's path to becoming a pole is not without its challenges, but it is a path India is uniquely equipped to tread. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Saurav. I think this is a dream panel because everyone has stuck to time and I have not had to say 2 minutes, 1 minute. So excellent. Thank you all. And before I come back, if there is time for me to get back, I would first like to open the floor for any comments, questions. Shall we maybe start with you and then go to the floor? Okay, the other way around.
Discussions here.
I see. Okay. My apologies. I didn't. So may I invite the discussants then first to make their comments?
Firstly, I think.
Sorry, just wait. We have discussants and then we'll open the floor. So why, please come in front then. Why are you in that corner? Please come ahead. The discussion should be right here.
Weren't any places.
Ma'am, we have actually 16 participants, 8 from all across India and 8 from Delhi who are part of the discussants.
Okay.
So we have placed 4 of them for the first session, but he's also there, so they can all ask questions.
Perfect. Okay. So maybe the discussants can then start. Akshay, can you wait? And maybe we'll start with. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Hi. I'm audible. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, so I'm Shivam Bahuganas, a 4th year PhD scholar at South Asian University. Before I begin my question, first of all, I would like to commend all the panelists for such an informative panel on the India's increased role specifically in this multipolar world order. I mean, I don't need to add to what all has been said. Okay, so I do have a question. I would have like 2, one for each. So my first question would be to Mr. Shubham Singh Charak on his India's engagement in I2U2. Okay, so it's, one of the things that you mentioned on the specific parts of I2U2 in the strategic aspect is of course the the China balancing external, like you talked about Turkey, you talked about China, you talked about Russia. So one of the things that has been stood out to me is the fact that as far as you mentioned the Turkish angle, so we do have to be aware of the fact that Israel is actually despite Erdogan's rhetoric, Israel has actually been a very close Turkish ally. And when we saw the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, specifically in the Artsakh region, we saw that the Israeli arms did a lot of help Azerbaijani forces a lot. And while Armenia is an Indian strategic military partner, so in that essence, I mean, are we, and of the 4, I think 3 of them are generally linked to the American, larger security order. So I'm just curious as to how exactly, is India, how much of a role is India setting in the I2U2 as far as the strategic angle, as the largest strategic conversation is concerned? Because I do sort of see I2U2 as more of a West-leaning grouping. Not that it's wrong, but I'm just curious as to what exactly does India add to it. Thank you.
So may I invite the second discussion? We'll just collect the.
No, I don't have a specific. I'm Akshay. I'm teaching. I'm assistant professor at Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts. In fact, sort of following on all these 4 presentations, and my sort of loud thinking is in terms of all these 4 presentations in their individual capacities actually make one point more emphatic, is that multipolar world is more of an aspirational thing in terms of what India wants and rather than what India thinks that it is. In the sense, the first talk about UN Security Council reforms, and we have been talking about UN Security Council reforms for a while, and I think you could say that as the energy about demanding that sort of gone down in recent past, and then we are more focusing on minilaterals and something which Shubham pointed out as well, that while we may be talking about it has currency of saying that thing out loud, but the nature of the world suggests that it's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think it's India's comfort in the unipolar world that it did not want any sides to be taken, and India was comfortable with that. And now when we are between the orders from unipolar to multipolar, I think somewhere there is a transition. And history, we have seen that whenever the world order is in transition, it creates a lot of flux. And this is what I think India is trying to project, that this is what the aspirational reality should be. And therefore, India's focus on, like what Shivam also pointed out, that there are certain strategic overtures that we are doing to project the world. But are we in a danger of then assuming that it is already a multipolar world, something that Dr. Mohan also talked about? So I just wanted quick comments that is it an aspirational thing, and are we just too early to say that this is a multipolar thing? Yeah.
Thank you, and may I invite the next discussant?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Abhishek. I'm a research intern here. A take on soft power, which my friend spoke about. So I think in the international relations, narratives matter a lot. How we set the narrative for the world, it matters a lot. Am I audible? Is this? So I was reading a book. It was by Vikram Sood, and he talks about narratives. And I think gradually in the past few years, the narratives of soft power is very much spoken about. But I think how much it is, if you look at West, especially US, they have packaged their narrative of soft power in the form of a tangible product and have supplied to the entire world. For example, denim jeans, Coca-Cola, or Burger King and whatnot. How far have we been able to package our things, our narrative of soft power in a form of a tangible product and have supplied to the world? This matters a lot. I mean, my background is in bachelor's in commerce, so I think more in terms of business. This is one point that I want to place because it matters a lot. In IR or in political science, we generally talk about two things: it's market and state, how well these are coordinated. So how well we are able to package our products. We cannot just rely on culture or on religion and these kind of things. It has to be something tangible which should be placed in the pockets of the people around the world. And one small point that I would like to place is, again, it was Joseph Nye gave the idea of soft power. I would like to place the idea of smart power, because we cannot deny the importance of hard power. In the narrative of soft power, I think sometimes we try to neglect the importance of hard power, which is military, definitely, because we have two very hostile neighbors on our western and eastern borders. So a perfect balance between both, I think, would be a much better argument on my part, that a perfect balance between both hard power and soft power, because we cannot neglect both, and we have both the powers. Whether it is culture, definitely we have it, and on the military front, definitely we have it. So a perfect balance between the both would be a more better option to bank on. And if other people have a different perception, I would definitely like to hear from them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there more discussants? Yes, please.
Greetings, everyone. I am Avni Sablok and I'm a research associate at the council. So adding to the question that the previous discussant was asking about, my question is, how do we measure soft power in the context of geopolitical diplomacy and strategy? How do we place it? Because the larger question is, in the end, how do we measure, has it increased or is it affecting people geopolitically or otherwise? Thank you.
India is buying petroleum from Russia, and Russian and European countries are putting more sanctions to Russia. And in G20, we are seeing that America is looking towards India for whatever the reasons, whatever the interests of America. And what are the things why America is looking towards India? And if we are talking about the soft power, what we are producing or what we are giving to them? Why is America is interested in India? Because whether it is economic order or value order, what it is, I just wanted to know about it.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and I hope all the presenters are taking note of your questions. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello everyone, I'm Hari Shankar, I'm a first year research scholar. I would like to really appreciate all the speakers today for your wonderful presentations. Just some thoughts went through me. I was thinking about Viktor Frankl and his novel, Man's Search for Meaning. Somehow it mentioned something called the Stockdale paradox. That is, we need to be ruthlessly pragmatic about our current reality, at the same time being really hopeful for the future. That's what Sri Rajamohan mentioned in his earlier remarks. We are not willing to look inwards as to what our true stature is in terms of, I think an appraisal, an objective appraisal is needed. One thing this G20 summit recently showed us was that we have the diplomatic prowess to achieve a clean consensus between these warring parties. So in terms of concretizing our gains on the diplomatic front, that's one arena I believe India needs to really invest upon. We are having GI tags, which are a concrete asset on an unprecedented scale now. But to what extent are we really able to capitalize on these gains in terms of economically flaunting these GI tags, showcasing them on the global stage? I think we need to be really realistic in terms of assessing our gains and addressing our shortcomings. That's something that occurred to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I am Prakash Kundrakpam. I'm a third-year doctoral fellow at Guwahati University. So first of all, good presentations all around. I'd like to just add on and maybe comment on a few of them, general comments, that the thoughts that went through me. First of all, Mr. Saurav Kumar has also spoken on it, that we're now looking towards a reformed world order, but is it really an aspirational multipolar world order, or have we actually arrived at multipolarity? That's the question. And while the speakers have mainly spoken about the prospect of what India could do, I believe there are certain challenges on the ways, on the road to India actually being a significant voice in the emerging world order. The first is that we need to, as Professor Sri Rajamohan spoke about it, we need to reconcile the two images of India. The first is that the image of India as a growing world power, and secondly, the image of India as a developing nation. Right, so we need to think that there is necessarily not a disconnect between these two images, but rather a continuum. Because how India projects itself at the international arena is not only influenced by how the state projects itself, but since India does not, for instance, have a state-controlled media, the media can also play a very important role. NGOs who come to India and study India could also play an important role. So India would probably need to work on its domestic front, more robust mechanisms of human development, public distribution mechanisms, and so forth, so that we bring the levels of development within the Indian nation state to such a standing that it becomes recognized at the international level. Now, when we talk about multipolarity, we find that it's very much evident that there is fissures in the extent post-Cold War multipolar system that we were currently subscribing to until the recent past. Now, it's evident in the New Delhi Declaration as well, and also the recent, if we go to the recent Jakarta summit. So, but how India tends to these fissures is actually what matters. And in doing so, I believe that India's posture at the UN Security Council reforms it's worth noting. The first is that India subscribes to a very negative criticism of the politics of representation and a long historicity of its demand, stating that if the UN does not represent a country which is the fifth largest economy and which is home to the population of the largest demographic dividend, then what sort of moral and political legitimacy does it exact from the world? So that's one of the major points of argument for the Indian nation state. And this is something that occurs not only at the UN but in the larger scene of international relations as well. So India has always maintained that we need not subscribe to the imposed Eurocentric narratives of the West, but because India has such a large population and a large, long history of civilizational values, we are free to construct our own narrative. However, if we bring this to the UN context, I believe that we also need a supplementary positive development within the Indian nation that would amount to, say, for instance, the development of its own military and economic capacities, so that our demand for UNSC membership is not taken lightly. While the negative criticism of the UN's representativeness should be continued. So this is another point. Thirdly, a few have spoken on... Yes,
if we can maybe shorten this a little bit so that there are others who can come
yes,
back.
ma'am.
We're already out of time.
Yes, ma'am, I'm concluding. So thirdly, some have spoken on soft power. So I feel like in the end, India also does not subscribe to a dichotomy between pragmatism and ideology, because we subscribe to a continuum of it, because ideas influence realities, ideas influence consciousness. So we need not subscribe to the idea that they should go differently. So when it comes to soft power and the construction of knowledge of how international relations is conceptualized, India needs to be clear on what it actually wants, what the Indian ideology is, and stress that this Indian ideology is in the benefit of the entire international community. So that's what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important points, and my apologies to cut you short, mainly in the interest of time. Yes, please.
Regarding this multipolar world order, I just want to make, I have a doubt. Right?
The very last one, 2 seconds.
So I have two questions to Shivam. First is, you have mentioned about both multilateralism and multipolarity. So do you think that there is a difference between the two terminologies and how it is being applied in the practical world? Second question is, you have also mentioned that the world is moving to bipolarity. Okay, so will the world accept any kind of alternative order led by China in the longer run, or it is just an idea which is just floating around? So, thank you.
Thank you for keeping it short, and this signifies how good the presentations were, because you've generated so much food for thought. So now deal with it. Back to you. Would you like to take the same sequence? Chongpi, would you like to start? Do you want to reverse the order? Why don't you start, Saurabh, then?
Thank you so much for your questions. I'll take them one by one. First one was about multipolarity as an aspiration, or have we already arrived there? In terms of soft power, I believe it's still an aspiration. But let's not undermine the idea that just because it's an aspiration, it does not, there are lesser chances of turning into reality. The examples that I quoted from the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and the 20th century, the various countries that emerged as powerful powerhouses of those centuries, we did not see that happen in the first 2 decades of those centuries, but over the whole 100 years of that century. We are only 20 odd years into the 21st century yet, and it's only positive or only hopeful that we will actually arrive at a multipolar order in the future, guided of course by soft power and aided by hard power. The idea that the question that was posed as to whether we need to talk in terms of smart power, yes, we do. Hard power, of course, cannot be ignored. It has to be packaged with an element of soft power. When the idea of soft power originated in 1989 with Joseph Nye, at that time also the idea was that the US is on a decline, and maybe because just like Japan and the UK saw a decline, US is also going to do the same. But Joseph Nye argued that it's not the same kind of decline we're talking about. US might decline economically or militarily, but there is another element that will keep it high on the hopes, that is soft power again. So from that point of view, of course, there needs to be hard power, but then it has to be packaged within the garb of, there has to be hard power packaged within the garb of soft power, so that we do not generate any skepticism. Then there was a question as to how far have we packaged our soft power, or have we packaged our soft power at all into something tangible? This is something, I'm glad you asked this question, because this is something that I can answer from my own very experience. My PhD study was based on fieldwork in 4 countries of Africa, during which I interviewed over 100 people, natives, PIOs, and experts in that region, whereby I can at least think of 5 odd points where you see that it is very much tangible. One, of course, religion and how religion translates into tourism. These countries, of course, have a large amount of Indian diaspora, Africa, and otherwise also 32 million diaspora that we have. They generate soft power for India in terms of tourism, because they come here to visit for religious journeys, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, the 4 religions, 4 India-based religions. Then secondly, the charity that the Indian diaspora has given to the people of the host countries wherever they have lived. People like Hasmukh Patel, for instance, in Kenya, are a known name just because they engage in so much charity. They provide water in the water scarce areas, they provide food in the food scarce areas, they provide money for education, and that has generated a soft power for India. Bollywood, a known name everywhere. Music, even if the people of Africa, for instance, do not understand the Hindi lyrics, they still enjoy dancing to the tunes of those songs. That again is a tangible example that we see. Products, Indian products that have become popular in the entire world, more so in Africa. Bajaj, you go to countries like Tanzania and Kenya, you see the autos being called as Bajaji, basically saying that it's the Bajaj company auto, and the autos itself are called Bajaji, giving again an element of soft power. Lastly, cuisine. Biryani, chapatis, dosa, etc. have become a household name in the countries of Africa, at least where I visited, and I'm sure it's the case in other countries as well. Then the next question was about measuring soft power. How do we actually measure it? Well, in my thesis also, I was able to generate the ideas that soft power is actually measurable by mixing a quantitative and qualitative definition of soft power. And even beyond that, we have had 3 indexes in the past, one still ongoing, which has shown us that countries can actually be ranked quantifiably in terms of their soft power, beginning in 2008 with the New Persuaders Index, followed by the Soft Power 30 Index by Portland Communications, which took data from Facebook as objective data, and also conducted some interviews to collect perception data to support that soft power can actually be measured. And the currently ongoing Soft Power Index is the Global Soft Power Index, the 3rd edition of which came in this February 2023, and the next edition is set to come in the next year. All these indexes have basically given a ranking of soft power, measuring tangibly and quantifiably how much soft power a country possesses. India has, in the last index, managed to enter into that index and currently ranks at the 27th number. Last question was what is India giving to the US in terms of soft power? I believe there are at least 2 things that India has to offer to the US specifically. One, the Indian diaspora, which has a huge stake in the politics as well as economy of the United States. And secondly, market, the huge market that India has to offer in terms of products that are being exported from the United States. I believe those were all the questions.
Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you so much.
Very precisely answered. I think you've covered all the questions that were raised. Shubham, 2 minutes, please.
So you asked about the Turkish assertiveness. If we see the relations of Turkey with US, UAE and India. With US, just yesterday, US shot a drone of Turkey. So the Turkish relation with US is not so good. They are out of the F-35 project. When we see the US relation with the UAE, UAE is already an ally of US as well as of Saudi. So the Turkey is going to assert its dominance over the Arab world, projecting it as a Arab world leader, whereas Saudi doesn't want this to be happen. So as an ally of Saudi and US, UAE is also having some kind of not so good things with Turkey. When it comes to the India, so Turkey always supported Pakistan in various things, which are against India. Turkey supported Pakistan in UN resolution against Kashmir. Turkey is still backing Pakistan for all the other things. So India is also having not very good relations with Turkey. So if accepting this Israel, So all these three countries are not having very good relations with Turkey. So I think when three of the countries are having not very good relation with Turkey, so one country just which is Israel will not have any kind of thing within the I2U2 framework to have anything on this.
Thank you, Shubham, and over to Shivam now.
Ma'am, with regard to the first concept of multilateralism and by multipolarity, we have seen that there was unilateral Great Britain, unipolarity Great Britain, bipolarity US and Russia. Then there is a fear that there will be a greater bipolarity like USA at one end and Russia befriending with the China. So there is a fear that there will be again a bipolarity and the South. Which are the Asian countries, South Asian countries, African countries, depending upon them. So it is an assumption that we will again move on to them. And for the multilateral and concept, that is something we have to understand that in a unipolar world, there is no bilateral, multilateral, because there is always this balance of interest. Also in bipolarity, there may be multilateral, bilateral, polylateral, but there will always be a disbalance of interest among the parting countries. But in multipolarity, if we talk about India leading the multipolar in the South Asian countries, we will see that there is a balance of interest in the multilateralism where the India is leading the role, but it is befriending with the nation. So there is a balancing interest approach which India is leading. And with regard to the global political, yeah, I have answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, and over to Chongpi.
So with regards to the UNSC reforms, as my colleague had also mentioned, the UNSC reforms that have been demanded by India, especially in terms of representation, is is a valid question, because like he had pointed out, if India, with the world's largest population and demography, cannot be cannot be a part of the UNSC, United Nations Security Council, then where is it actually headed to? With that being said, obviously India has certain challenges, a lot of challenges, as Sam Mohan had mentioned earlier. He also talked about how we have to focus on what we do not do right. For example, India, although may be on the verge of becoming a global economic or military power, it has not been doing rather well in terms of the Human Development Index. It has been doing poorly. So to conclude, I think India has it has validity in asking for the United Nations Council reforms, but it will be with its challenges. We've come a long way, and I think we still have a long way to go.
Thank you very much. So, would you like to?
I want to thank all the ones who have presented their papers and the discussants. I'm just going to come in from an approach which is somebody who's worked in the world of diplomacy, and how do we approach diplomacy, and what is the role of diplomacy. This whole question about we are not doing too well in the domestic is, I would say that you have to understand the role of diplomacy is to link India's aspirations for growth and development, and diplomacy is a tool towards that. So it's not, you're not saying that you are doing diplomacy in some vacuum and you don't know what you're doing. Diplomacy is used for the growth of the nation. So that, I think, is a fundamental which we must recognize. Point number one. Point number two is that from what I hear is that you're saying many of the things are aspirational. Let me tell you, without an aspiration, without a target, you really don't know where you're moving towards. So if you do have aspirations, you do have targets, you're working towards that. I would say it's very important for nations to be aspirational. I do not think that any nation who is so self-satisfied, wants to do nothing, is ever going to even grow. So aspiration is very important for a nation. Third is, you mentioned about the whole concept of multilateralism and multipolar. Let me deal with multilateralism and UN. All of you mentioned that India should be a member of the UN Security Council. And I would really say that yes, India should be a member of the UN Security Council. It has not become a member of the Security Council because they are contra interests. They don't want you to be there. The question no longer is about, will India be there or not? I think there's a very broad understanding that India should be a member of the UN Security Council. The question is now moving towards, is the UN relevant any longer? I think you all have not looked at that question, because if the UN does not reform itself, and that is the need of the hour, the question of the relevance of the United Nations and these bodies will come up. I think we have to be mindful of that. So that is one thing I would mention. You can, I mean, it's been there for 75 years. What is it going to do to ensure it will be there for 75 years? If it does not move in a world that is changing so rapidly, I don't know, the question marks will be more about the United Nations rather than about India's membership to the United Nations. So that is one point I want to make. And I do also feel these arguments about, which you also mentioned, efficacy, efficiency, these are all hogwash. I worked in the United Nations, and I can tell you that a 15-member and expanding it to 21 members does not impact its efficiency. So, these are arguments to counter any kind of reform. And we do know that the UN Security Council needs reforms. And the last is, the whole concept of a multipolar world. From the broad discussions, it is very clear that it is no longer unipolar. If it is not unipolar, what is it? Is it bipolar? I don't think so. I don't think there are two parts deciding which way the world is moving. So it's not bipolar. So what is the decision-making process and how are countries influencing? We may not have reached, as you say, multipolar world, but the fact is you are seeing the growth of more and more players in the world. You are seeing the growth of India. I would really say that, you may question, is it a pole, is it not a pole, or whatever, it's definitional. But the fact is, does India's voice count? And I think that if you are looking at a global order in which you say India's voice does not count, I'm afraid you are not really going to make a decision which is going to be actually taking into account global realities. So that I think is something diplomats globally are recognizing. And if you think, and if you are calculating that, United States is taking a decision on South Asia or even the broader region without taking into account into its calculus the role of India, I don't think so. No capital in the world is, when they look at this part of the world, is going to ignore India. Even if you look at Africa, I do not think countries would look at Africa without maybe consulting India. We have been in Africa for very long. We do have interests in Africa. So I do feel that, India's role is very much there and it is taken into account. Arguments about a pole, firstly, what is a pole? None of you defined what a pole is. So what is the pole? What are the attributes of a pole? And I think that if you were to even go into the definitional, I would say that India is a pole. And you refer to the hierarchy of poles, fine, there could be hierarchy of poles. But the fact is that, India is emerging there, and to say that India is the same as Africa, some country which is really struggling, South Sudan, I don't accept it. Is India more closer to influence global politics like France? I would accept that argument. So for me, India is very much moving towards becoming a pole. So I had to say this because I am a practicing diplomat. I have been there and I have entered into rooms. We have discussed, we have set the agenda. So I would really go along that argument. I would believe that, of course, triumphalism is something which we should not get into. But the fact is that if you don't even recognize your strength, who's going to? So I rest my case.
Thank you so much. And I agree with many of the points you made and disagree with some. But if I respond to the papers and presentations, perhaps I'll have to borrow some time from Dr. Dhananjay's session, which is not good. I do want to just make last 2 points. First point is, of course, to the hosts, to ICWA. I think this is a great idea, bringing young scholars. I don't know if, did you mention it's the first time it's been done? I really hope it's not the last, because it's wonderful to see all the research. Sitting here in Delhi, we don't also get to see what all is happening. It's wonderful to see all of you from other parts, and hopefully this will be growing from strength to strength. Second point is just an overview point, because we are also all from academia. And while I agree, the diplomat's view will be distinct from an academic view. And a sense that I got from a lot of the presentations was this the happy song about India doing very well, which is very good. This is good. It's not good to be pessimistic. I agree with that. But there have to be, challenges that have to be addressed, and a critical inquiry is key to academia. So as academics, even a simple thing like semantics, like language, when diplomats, for example, represent India, or ministry officials, they always use the pronoun we, and that's the valid, legitimate use of the pronoun. For our students, we usually say, please keep yourself distant. Don't say we, because you're not here to defend or to project, but to critically assess, right? So India, policies, that keeps you a little bit distant from what it is. So both are equally important. I agree absolutely that definitions are very important. What is multipolar? The international system is a messy place. These are, at the end of the day, constructs that we use to make it a little bit, to make sense out of it. Within that, hierarchies, what a pole is, we need much more discussion on that. But definitely the focus on and this is a common sort of thing I'm saying to all four presenters, that please do look at challenges, and sometimes we tend to confuse what we want to see and what actually is. Perhaps we need to give a little bit more focus on that as well, to come out with, sort of balanced outcomes of academic inquiries. So I will stop here, and thank you very much for having me here. And sorry if we've transgressed on time, which I think we have, but back to you, Dr. Banerjee.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and our speakers for such an enlightening first session. We will take exactly a 5-minute break, because by 12:30 we start our next session, so you can go out, take your tea, and bring it back here. Thank you so much.